The wind rolled across the open plains of Red Hollow like a living thing, bending tall grass and carrying whispers of a legend every rancher in the territory knew by heart. They called him Ghost, the last wild Mustang. His coat shimmered like silver at sunrise, his mane black as storm clouds, and his speed unmatched by any horse ever bred in a corral. He had never worn a saddle, never felt a bit, never answered to a human hand. And now, a reward of $5,000 waited for whoever could capture him alive. Amber Whitlock adjusted the brim of her hat as she studied fresh tracks, pressed deep into the dry earth. The prints were strong, deliberate, unafraid. Her pulse quickened. Still running free, she murmured. She needed that reward more than she wanted to admit. Her family ranch was drowning in debt. Drought had thinned the cattle. Supplies were low. $5,000 could save everything her father had worked for. But she didn't want to break Ghost. She wanted to understand him. The thunder of approaching hooves broke her concentration. Amber didn't have to turn to know who it was. Kyle Mercer, tall, broad-shouldered, steady in the saddle, like he'd been born there. He had a reputation across 3 counties as the finest horseman in the territory. If anyone could catch Ghost, it would be him. Kyle slowed his bay stallion and tipped his hat slightly. "Didn't expect company," he said. Amber folded her arms. "You don't own the plains." "No," he replied evenly. "But I plan to own that Mustang." Their eyes locked, challenge sparking instantly. Kyle dismounted and crouched beside the tracks. "He passed through not more than an hour ago." "I know," Amber answered coolly. "I've been following him since dawn." Kyle stood. "Then we both know there's no room for mistakes." The air thickened between them. This wasn't just competition. It was pride, survival. A distant whinny echoed from the ridge. Both heads snapped up, and there he was. Ghost stood silhouetted against the morning sky, muscles taut, tail flicking in the wind. He watched them as if measuring their worth. Even from a distance, his presence commanded the land. Amber felt her breath catch. Kyle felt something unfamiliar stir. Not greed, not triumph, but respect. Without warning, Ghost bolted. Amber swung into her saddle. "He's heading toward the canyon." Kyle mounted in one fluid motion. "That terrain's dangerous." "Then keep up," she shot back. They rode hard across the open stretch, dust rising behind them. Amber leaned forward, guiding her mare carefully, watching how Ghost moved, not reckless, but precise, intelligent. Kyle studied Amber as much as the Mustang. She wasn't chasing wildly. She was reading the land. As they neared the canyon's edge, Ghost slowed briefly, glancing back. Amber eased her reins. "Easy." Kyle frowned. "What are you doing?" Giving him space. But the moment shattered when another pair of riders appeared from the southern ridge. "Bounty hunters. They'll spook him," Amber snapped. Gunfire cracked through the canyon walls. Ghost reared, panicked. Kyle reacted instantly, steering between the hunters and the Mustang. "You'll kill him like that." One of the hunters laughed. "Prize money, don't care how scared he is." Amber galloped wide, cutting off Ghost's escape toward a steep drop. Her heart pounded as she positioned herself to guide him away from danger. "Easy, boy," she whispered as Ghost skidded near loose rock. For one terrifying second, it seemed he might fall. Kyle roped one hunter's arm, yanking him sideways. Chaos erupted, dust, shouting, pounding hooves. Then, Ghost leaped across a narrow gap in the canyon wall and vanished into safety. Silence fell. The bounty hunters retreated, cursing. Amber and Kyle sat breathless in the settling dust. "You could have let them take him," Kyle said quietly. Amber shook her head. "Not like that." Kyle studied her differently now. Maybe this wasn't just about winning. Maybe it was about something more. And as the wind carried the fading echo of Ghost's hooves deeper into the wild, Amber realized this hunt would change more than just her future. It might change her heart. Morning light spilled across the canyon walls, painting them gold and amber. The land looked peaceful now, as if gunfire and chaos had never shattered the silence the day before. But Amber hadn't slept much. She sat near her small campfire, staring into the coals as her coffee cooled untouched in her tin cup. Ghost had nearly fallen. The image replayed in her mind over and over. The skid of loose rock, the sharp edge of the ravine. $5,000 suddenly felt smaller than it had yesterday. Hoofbeats approached slowly. Amber didn't look up. You follow me everywhere, Kyle. I could say the same about you. She finally lifted her gaze. Kyle guided his horse into the clearing, calm and steady, as always. But something had shifted in his expression. Less rivalry, more thoughtfulness. You tracking him alone? He asked. I was planning to. Kyle dismounted. The bounty hunters won't quit. They'll bring more men next time. Amber knew he was right. Ghost was no longer just a legend. He was a target. Kyle stepped closer to the dying fire. We can keep fighting each other, he said evenly. Or we can make sure no one hurts that horse. Amber studied him carefully. And the prize? Kyle's jaw tightened slightly. We'll figure that out later. Silence stretched between them. Trust didn't come easy on the frontier, but neither did second chances. Fine, Amber said at last. Temporary alliance. Kyle extended his hand. Temporary. Her palm met his firm, steady. A spark passed between them, unexpected and unsettling. They saddled up and rode deeper into the canyon, following faint tracks only experienced riders would notice. Ghost had climbed toward higher ground, where scrub brush and narrow paths offered protection. He's not running blind, Amber observed. He's choosing terrain. Kyle nodded. He knows these hills better than any of us. A sudden rustle sounded ahead. They slowed their horses. Ghost stood in a small clearing, head high, ears alert. Sunlight glinted off his silver coat. This time, he didn't flee immediately. Amber slowly removed her hat, lowering her gaze, not in submission, but in respect. Kyle watched her carefully. You really think he understands that? I think he understands intention. He slid from her saddle, boots pressing softly into the dirt. Each step she took was measured, calm. Ghost snorted, but held his ground. Kyle remained mounted, but loosened his reins, making sure his posture wasn't threatening. Easy, Amber whispered. The Mustang's muscles twitched. He pawed once at the earth. A distant echo of voices drifted through the canyon. Kyle stiffened. Their back. Ghost's head snapped toward the sound. Amber didn't hesitate. We need to move him. How? Guide him. North toward the open ridge. Kyle understood instantly. If Ghost reached the wide plains, he'd outrun anyone. The voices grew louder. Amber mounted swiftly. Together, they positioned their horses wide, not chasing Ghost, but influencing his direction. The Mustang bolted, but not in panic this time, in motion. Kyle rode strong on one side. Amber held steady on the other. They weren't trapping him, they were protecting him. Behind them, the bounty hunters appeared at the canyon mouth. Cut them off, one shouted. Gunshots cracked again. Amber's heart pounded, but she held her line. Kyle urged his stallion forward, blocking an approaching rider. You'll ruin him, Kyle shouted. He's worth money, nothing more, came the reply. Ghost surged up the incline toward the ridge. Amber pushed her mare harder, breath burning in her chest. Almost there, she called. The Mustang reached the crest, paused, then raced across the open highland. Free space, room to breathe. The bounty hunters slowed, realizing they couldn't catch him on open ground. Dust settled slowly as silence reclaimed the hills. Amber exhaled shakily. Kyle rode beside her, close enough that their knees nearly brushed. You rode well, he said quietly. So did you. They watched Ghost in the distance, a silver streak against endless blue sky. Amber felt something shift inside her. The competition was fading. In its place grew something steadier, stronger. Kyle glanced at her, sunlight catching in his eyes. You ever wonder, he said softly, if some things aren't meant to be owned? Amber looked at Ghost, disappearing into freedom. Yes, she replied. I think I'm starting to. For the first time, the prize didn't feel like the goal. Protecting him did, and neither of them could ignore that they were beginning to care about more than just the Mustang. The sky stretched wide and endless above them, painted in soft shades of lavender and fading gold as evening settled over the plains. Amber and Kyle had ridden hard all afternoon, keeping a distant watch on Ghost as he moved across the high ridge. They didn't chase him anymore. They followed, from far enough away that he didn't feel cornered. They made camp near a quiet stream, the sound of water, gentle against smooth stones. Ghost grazed several hundred yards away, watchful but calmer, now that the bounty hunters had retreated. Amber knelt beside the fire, feeding it small sticks. Sparks drifted upward like tiny stars. Kyle unsaddled his horse in silence before finally speaking. "You're not like the others who tried to catch him." Amber glanced up, meaning, "You look at him like he's more than a prize." She sat back on her heels. "He is." Kyle studied the flames. "I used to think breaking a wild horse proved something, that it showed strength. And now," he exhaled slowly, "now I think strength might be knowing when not to." Amber smiled faintly. "That's the first wise thing I've heard you say." Kyle chuckled softly. "Careful. I might start talking more." Firelight flickered across their faces. The tension that once defined their encounters had softened into something quieter, more thoughtful. Amber picked up a small stone and rolled it between her fingers. "My father always said, wild things deserve respect. You can guide them, work beside them. But the moment you try to own their spirit, you lose something." Kyle watched her carefully. "And if freeing him costs you your ranch?" The question hit deeper than she expected. Amber's gaze drifted toward the dark silhouette of Ghost against the dim horizon. "I don't know," she admitted. "But if I save my ranch by destroying something beautiful, what kind of future is that?" Kyle didn't answer right away. He had come into this hunt thinking only about the money. $5,000 would have expanded his land, bought new cattle, secured comfort for years. But now, he saw the Mustang differently. And Amber, too. A sudden snap of a branch in the distance made them both stiffen. Kyle reached for his rifle instinctively. Amber stood slowly. Through the brush emerged two shadowed figures on horseback. "Bounty hunters. Again." "They don't quit," Kyle muttered. Ghost lifted his head sharply, muscles tensing. Amber's voice was steady, but urgent. "If they fire again, he'll run straight, toward the cliffs." Kyle nodded once. "Then we stand between." The riders advanced, confident and careless. "Evening," one called mockingly. "You two guarding our horse." "He's not yours," Amber shot back. The man laughed. "Money says otherwise." Before he could raise his rifle, Kyle stepped forward, weapon drawn but lowered. "You fire again, and we won't be as patient." The standoff hung heavy in the air. Amber moved subtly toward Ghost, her posture calm, voice soft. "Easy. It's all right." The Mustang's ears flicked toward her. The bounty hunters hesitated. They hadn't expected resistance. "You're throwing away easy money," one growled. "Maybe," Kyle replied evenly. "But some things aren't for sale." The men exchanged frustrated glances. Outnumbered and losing daylight, they finally turned their horses. "This ain't over," one warned before disappearing into the trees. Silence returned slowly. Amber released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Kyle lowered his rifle. Ghost remained still, watching them. Amber stepped closer to the Mustang than ever before. Not touching, not reaching, just standing. After a long moment, Ghost lowered his head slightly and resumed grazing. Kyle walked to Amber's side. "He trusts you," he said quietly. Amber shook her head gently. "No, he trusts that we won't harm him." Their shoulders brushed lightly. Neither stepped away. The fire crackled behind them as stars began to fill the sky. Kyle looked down at her. "If we keep protecting him, we'll lose the reward." Amber met his gaze. "Would you regret it?" Kyle searched her eyes, steady, determined, kind. "No," he answered honestly. Something shifted between them. No longer rivalry, no longer simple partnership, something deeper, warmer. Above them, the constellations stretched endlessly across the frontier sky, and for the first time since the hunt began, Amber wasn't thinking about debt or prizes. She was thinking about choices, about freedom, and about the man standing beside her, who was beginning to feel less like an opponent and more like home. Dawn came quietly, spilling pale gold light across the ridge where Ghost stood like a guardian of the wild. The air was crisp, carrying the promise of heat later in the day. Amber woke before the sun fully rose. For a moment, she simply listened, wind brushing through grass, the distant call of a hawk, the steady breathing of horses nearby. Kyle was already awake, sitting on a fallen log, watching the horizon. "You sleep at all?" she asked softly. "A little," he replied. "You?" "Not much." They didn't need to say why. Word had spread fast. The bounty hunters wouldn't be the only ones coming now. $5,000 was enough to tempt half the territory. Kyle stood and scanned the valley below. And there they were. For riders, not the same men from before. These were ranch hands, by the look of them, experienced, determined. Amber's stomach tightened. "They'll push him toward the ravine." Kyle nodded. "And once he's cornered, they won't care how they bring him down." Ghost lifted his head, sensing tension in the air. He shifted his weight, restless but not yet running. "We can still take him ourselves," Kyle said quietly. Amber looked at him. "If we catch him before they do," he continued, "we control what happens. We keep him safe." The words hung heavy between them. Capture him. To protect him. Amber knew Kyle wasn't speaking from greed. He was trying to find a solution that didn't end in blood. But she also knew what ropes and corrals did to wild spirits. The riders below began spreading out, forming a loose semicircle. "They're hurting him already," she whispered. Kyle swung into his saddle. "We don't have much time." Amber mounted as well, heart pounding. They rode toward Ghost, positioning themselves ahead of the approaching men. Dust rose in thick clouds behind the riders below. Ghost's ears flicked wildly as he sensed movement closing in from all sides. "Easy," Amber called gently. But fear rippled through the Mustang's muscles. The riders shouted, waving ropes. "Left, cut off the ridge." Kyle moved swiftly, blocking one rider's advance. "Back off. You want the money? Earn it." A ranch hand shouted. Amber rode, closer to Ghost, but not to trap him, to guide him. "Go north," she whispered urgently. "Find the open land." Ghost reared slightly as a rope flew past his shoulder. Kyle's jaw tightened. He could end it right now. One perfect throw. One clean catch. He had the skill. He had the chance. Amber saw him hesitate. Their eyes met across the chaos. And in that silent exchange, the choice was made. Kyle dropped his rope. "Clear the way," he shouted to Amber. She understood instantly. Together, they charged toward the narrow gap between two riders, breaking the semicircle. Ghost bolted through the opening. A ranch hand cursed and tried to pursue. But Kyle blocked him again. "You're letting him go," the man yelled. "Yes," Kyle answered firmly. Amber rode hard behind Ghost, not chasing, just keeping the path clear. The Mustang stretched into full stride, powerful and unstoppable. He reached the crest of the northern ridge and paused for half a heartbeat. The wind lifted his mane. The world seemed to still. Then he disappeared into the vast open plains. Beyond land, too wide for fences, too wild for capture. The riders below slowed, frustrated, and defeated. The prize was gone. Amber's chest rose and fell rapidly as silence returned. Kyle rode up beside her. "It's over," he said. She nodded slowly. Yes, the reality settled in. No reward, no easy fix for her ranch. It's just the truth of what they had chosen. Amber looked toward the distant horizon where Ghost had vanished. "I thought I'd feel regret," she admitted. "Do you?" Kyle asked gently. She shook her head. "Neither do I," he said. They sat side by side in the open sunlight, watching the empty ridge. For the first time since this began, there was no competition left between them, only understanding, and something quietly growing stronger than either of them had expected. They had lost the prize, but they had saved something priceless, and that changed everything. The plains felt different after Ghost disappeared. Quieter, wider, as if the land itself had exhaled. Amber rode slowly beside Kyle, neither speaking for several minutes. The other riders had long since turned back, grumbling about wasted time and lost money. Dust trails faded into the horizon, leaving only the two of them beneath the endless sky. $5,000 gone. Amber should have felt panic rising in her chest. The debt on her ranch hadn't vanished with the Mustang. The drought still lingered. The cattle still needed feed. But strangely, her heart felt lighter. "You all right?" Kyle asked gently. She nodded. "I think so." They reached the edge of her family's property just as the sun began its slow descent toward evening. The wooden fence leaned slightly in places. The barn roof needed repair. It wasn't much to look at, but it was home. Kyle dismounted first. "Your father around?" "In the house," Amber replied. "Resting." Kyle hesitated, then began tightening a loose fence post without being asked. Amber watched him for a moment. "You don't have to do that," she said. He shrugged lightly. "Maybe I want to." There was no pride in his voice, no obligation, just sincerity. Amber walked toward him, brushing dust from her skirt. "You gave up a lot today."
"So did you?"
She studied his face. "Do you regret it?" Kyle leaned back against the fence, considering the question carefully. "I've spent most of my life proving I could win," he said. "Outride, Otropy, outlast." He met her gaze. But today wasn't about winning. Amber's throat tightened slightly. "No," she agreed. It wasn't. A soft breeze carried the scent of dry grass across the field. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled lazily overhead. "Your ranch," Kyle continued. "It still needs help." Amber stiffened slightly. "I know. I've got land that hasn't been used in months," he said. "Grass enough for more cattle. Water, too." She blinked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he replied steadily, "we could help each other." Amber searched his expression for pity. She found none, only partnership. "You don't owe me anything," she said quietly. Kyle stepped closer. "Maybe I don't, but I want to." The words settled between them, warm and steady. Amber glanced toward the open plains beyond her ranch, and there, far off in the golden glow of sunset, she saw a flicker of silver on a distant ridge. Ghost. He stood tall against the horizon, free as the wind, watching the world he belonged to. Amber felt a slow smile spread across her face. "He's still out there," she whispered. Followed her gaze. Exactly where he should be. The Mustang tossed his mane once before turning and vanishing into the wild once more. Amber turned back to Kyle. "We didn't capture him," she said. "No," Kyle agreed. "But we protected him, and we protected something in ourselves too." Her heart beat faster as he gently took her hand. "This land's hard," Kyle said softly. "But it's easier when you're not standing alone." Amber squeezed his fingers. "You planning on staying a while?" He smiled, not cocky this time, not competitive, just certain. "If you'll have me." The setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, wrapping the ranch in warmth. Amber stepped closer, her shoulder brushing his. "I think," she said quietly, "we both found what truly matters. Not money, not pride, but choice, freedom, and the kind of love that doesn't try to cage what it cares about." In the distance, the wind carried faint echoes of pounding hooves, wild and untamed. Amber leaned into Kyle's side, and together they watched the last light fade over the plains. The prize had been lost, but something far greater had been found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.